and is a landscape architecture department manager. After earning his Bachelor of Landscape Architecture from the University of Georgia, Ryan joined Thompson Hutton in 2002. A licensed professional landscape architect and certified lead accredited professional, and he and his team of more than 15 landscape architects and designers collaborate with over 350 other Thompson Hutton employees to ensure that clients are provided with unique, sustainable, and innovative landscape, hardscape design, and planning solutions. His department's mission statement is to empathize, innovate, and create to the betterment of our society. He has resided in Effingham County, Georgia with his wife and 2 daughters since 2005 and is currently serving in his second term as the chairman of the board for the Effingham Chamber of Commerce. So he is no stranger to our world, which is nice. We are very happy to see Ryan. We've seen him a lot via Zoom, so it's nice to see him here in person. But what he's going to share with you today is the first time that we publicly put out the Dawson County Trail Plan that Betsy received a grant for us to be able to do from the Georgia Rural Center, and this is an awesome opportunity, so please think of any questions and enjoy his presentation.
Oh, see, can I possibly do this without the microphone? Can y'all hear me in the back okay without it?
There you go.
All right, well, thank you all so much for letting me be here today. I'll come back and control things in here in a bit. It's awesome to actually be in person. I think that's a big round of applause. Good at Zoom, but we still have our Zoom challenges even with this project. So I'm looking forward to being able to do this more and more in person. So the funny thing is, I've been involved with Effingham's Chamber on their board for this is starting the 4th year. And we typically only do one term for the chairman, but because of COVID, really it was an awkward, strange year to be the chairman last year. So we did a lot, and we didn't do a lot in person. So I volunteered, they accepted, and we're doing a second year there. But I just wanted to say that from a standpoint of, before I get into the plan, it's awesome to see so many people here that are involved with this chamber. I know, just from what we deal with, we hear needs the community, but getting people active, involved, engaged in that is often a challenge. So I applaud you all for being here. I'm sure it's for chamber reasons and not necessarily this presentation, but I will go through this. One of the first times we did it live was kind of the final draft master plan. I jokingly said I'd be done in about an hour and a half. I was done in about an hour and 10 minutes, and it took longer than I thought it was going to. So I promise you I've tried it a little bit down. So there's more information inside this that is available. Reach out to Betsy. We take a deeper dive in each of the trail segments we'll talk about. So just in case you have questions at the end, please, if you have a question immediately, raise your hand and I'll do my best to answer those. But I'll try to go through it. Again, this will be a kind of high-level approach to what we've developed for the master plan, go through a bit of the process that we've gone through. I just wanted to say thanks again to Dawson County for letting us be involved in the project. Thanks again to Georgia Rural Center for funding the project. You should all come up and thank Betsy and her team for applying for that. It's been great working with them, but also very, very little cost to this community for this master plan. So thank you, Georgia Rural Center. I just want to touch on this. So what you're going to see today is actually pages from the master plan. I haven't created some other presentation. This is actually a trimmed down version of the master plan. So I'm going to use this table of contents as kind of the agenda of what we'll talk about today. Obviously, I'm not going to read you the executive summary because I pulled that out and we're not going to go through that. But we will go through a little bit of the background of why we're doing the study, kind of how it evolved and got to where it is. We'll go through just the planning considerations that we gave to developing the plan, and then we'll go through actual details of the plan. The specific segments is what we call them, but they're kind of the connection trail segments that we've developed. And then really briefly touch on some implementation strategies. The majority of that I hope you can take from this is just that the plan needs support from the local community in order to be something beyond just a PDF. We used to say a book sitting on somebody's shelf, but now PDFs and somebody's computer hard drive, right? So it's, the plan is obviously going to evolve over time, but the last thing we want to plan to do is just be something that you heard and never gets acted upon. And that action is going to take effort from people in this room in order to push it forward. A little bit on the background. Obviously, you guys know the area much better than I can, so I'm not going to act like I'm giving you background in Dawson County. But one thing that I don't know if you're aware or not, we work with Betsy on a different study, a kind of bigger picture look at economic development for the county. And it started to evolve pieces of this specific greenway and trails, and 5 specific visions and goals. I don't know if you can see my cursor yet. Were to build a resilient community. These came out of that economic development study. Focus on development areas, so focus those areas specifically so we don't just have rampant growth that's uncontrolled. Generate opportunities for businesses, support community residents, and protect and conserve natural and cultural resources. I think you probably all see how a Trails and Greenway Master Plan kind of helps strengthen each of those bullets, right? I mean, they're all related to the wonderful, unique perspective that Dawson County has is the natural resources you have in this community are from a guy that actually grew up. I live in the Savannah area now, but I grew up in the hills just south of Rome, Georgia, in a place called Cedartown, Georgia. So I hopefully some of y'all are familiar with that a little bit. But I love coming back up here. The topography and the town feel reminds me a lot of growing up, and the natural resources are so much different here. So from that, we worked with Betsy and her team to establish a stakeholder group. We'll go through who those were, and there'll be a list of those up in a moment. But one of the first things when it was Ralph Forbes and a couple of other guys from our office, we came and met with the economic development study. And I think it was within the first 5 minutes of her kind of introducing us to the county. She's like, "Do you know how to identify Dawson County on the Georgia map?" I was like, I don't. Like, give me. I mean, I know you're close to Lake Lanier. I know you're north of Atlanta. So does anybody know what she told me to look for?
Scotty.
So I would never look at the Georgia map without seeing Dawson County again. So if there's one thing that comes with this, you've got one more Georgia resident who'll always know where Dawson County is. But in all seriousness, this map in particular is just something we added in to make sure that somebody that comes along with this document that's not as familiar with Dawson County, really, this is early in the document, really understands just how much natural resources and protected areas there are in the county. So that pretty well your entire western edge has an enormous amount compared to other communities of opportunities to be and explore nature and wilderness. And then also, you've got another very unique thing is the commercial activity, retail activity that's all Georgia 400. Again, I knew about it, but as we were doing that economic development study, I had no clue how much retail tax basis this county had compared to other counties of your size and population. It was mind-blowing and staggering to me. So you'll see in a bit, the main focus of this plan is how do we connect this activity with this opportunity, right? So that's the plan. Obviously, Dawson County is much larger than that little area that we're looking at and focused on. But with the scope and the breadth of what we were able to achieve and look at right now, that's kind of the area we specifically honed in and focused in on. And early in the process, we heard that there's these critical elements and these critical objectives that we want the plan to do. These are not really in particular order. A is not more important than C or vice versa. But one being leverage the existing energy. Just talked about that. It's in the retail 400 corridor. You've got both residents and visitors to the county coming in that area. How do you capture them for more than just that and get them to linger in the county for another afternoon, something of that nature? Then also creating a trail that connects the boom and the growth of the residential that you're seeing. That's not just tourism, it's how do we make that residential experience better. And then finally, connecting those natural resources. So you got Lake Lanier to your east, Dawson Forest to the west, and a long-term vision of how do you connect even further up through the rest of the county. I'll be brief on this, other than it's always important to recognize what the planning process was behind the master plan, that it wasn't developed in a hole somewhere with lines on and just what somebody's particular vision. So there was a list of stakeholders. You can see them there. Hopefully you can read them. But you know, we met pretty regularly. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I wish there would have been more of an opportunity to meet in person during this process. But it was again a proof of that you can do some pretty amazing things with technology and meeting and doing stakeholder meetings that way. I think some of the best things I said was when I was completely blank and nobody heard me, but I felt like it was really, really good. Those things I said at that time. But I really would like to thank those on this list. That it was a great process, got a lot of good feedback, and really I think you'll all see when we get to it. I mean, a lot of the points of interest we connect are kind of no-brainers, right? I mean, you've got these critical areas, and then we're just trying to figure out how can we connect those up. Data collection, that's just our job. Right? We can start going through and figuring out the background information. Then we start working on the master plan development. There's a couple of things on this slide that I'll point to. I'll start here. This is just a key that, again, I've lived in the Savannah area for 20 years or so going now, so to go uphill 5 feet, you probably have to walk a couple of miles to go up 5 feet. And I know here you have to go a couple of feet to go up 5 feet in some areas. So that is, with each segment, we specifically studied kind of the topography issues with it, right? We recognize that's probably long-term, one of the most challenging things with any trail that you do here is going to be how do we make it accessible, right? How do we make it enjoyable by all of your visitors and residents? How do you do it cost effectively? I mean, cost is going to be a challenge on any of that. And then identifying really for the future of, hey, when we get to studying and design in the future, this area right here we're going to be particular about, pay particular attention to because we can see that. And it'll be mapped out and you'll see that on each of the segments, how that relates to the segments. One other thing to point to is this 4 types of cyclists, and this comes from a study. There's a lot of discussion we're talking about. You'll notice all the trail segment types we talk about are multi-purpose, not just for pedestrians. You're doing a pretty good job of sidewalks with new development and sidewalks in like along 400 corridor. I know that there's new ones going in. The sidewalk is only usable legally for pedestrians, right? And bikeability is, I mean, really key to doing more than just a walk, right? I mean, people are usually aren't going to walk to the grocery store and then lug their groceries back. But if they had a bike route that they could do it safely and they were relatively distant, comfortable distance, they might do it. The one thing I just wanted to point out here, this is a study that's been going on for about 20 years. You'll see that there's 4 categories. I like to think I'm not in this no way, no how category. I think I'm in this interested but concerned category. Strong and fearless are those guys you see on Sunday mornings that are just booking it and they don't care and they slow traffic down and it's okay because it's their routine, right? And that's completely fine. But there's a very small fraction of our society that's willing to be that guy, right? Or that gal. But there's a huge portion of our society, this is a national study, that is interested, but the concerned part is safety, right? They're concerned how safe is it for me to get out here myself or with my family. And the majority of the answer to making them feel safe is completely separating that bicycling from the travel way of the road, right? So there's a lot of things you'll see with greenways. The East Coast Greenway, if you've heard about that, a decent portion of it is still on route, right? It's on the shoulder or on a dedicated paved area adjacent to the roadway. And I'm not saying you won't have pieces of that in this plan. I mean, all plans are going to need that from a cost standpoint, from a right-of-way availability standpoint, but try to plan for the better, right? To get more people able to be comfortable and use it. And the next piece, just kind of before we really started to define the routes we were going to look at, or the segments, were your points of interest. Again, I know you guys know your county better than I do, so I won't spend much time on them. But the energy that's at the outlet mall and just all the other retail activity that's there, but really the size of the parking area that's there could act as a natural trailhead or just an opportunity for people to come there, shop a bit, get on the trail, do something. Dawson Forest, man, that's a hidden gem that, again, something kind of like the terrier shape for your county. I have no clue, right? other than when we first started looking at it, and I was like, what is this big square parcel? And I guess about a month ago, actually, for the first time, we tried to do it right at the beginning of COVID, back in February or March or so. We were finally getting to go out there and visit that a bit, and that is such a unique history, right, from that standpoint. Both, I think, some of it's perceived and some of it's real history from hearing the guys out there tell us the stories, but it was a really neat place. And obviously, that's a key point of interest, that if you can get more people in the state or more people in the southeast, or understanding what that place is and getting them there without having to drive there and park there, just spend a bit of time there, you'll see that it's not that far-fetched to be able to connect those two long-term via bikeable trail system. The others are kind of your water access, and when I say water, Lake City, Lake Lanier, Thompson Creek Park, great little park space, perfect trailhead for something to start off and kick off on. Obviously, Etowah River, we've got an amazing amount of Etowah River mileage. What is it, the 24 miles of it? I was blown away by that once we started studying it, of just how much frontage and access you have to the river. You'll see that's a major component. It brings, obviously, built-in opportunities, but there's obviously great challenges that come with being adjacent to the river from that standpoint. Rock Creek Park, just outside of Dawson Forest, great spot, great opportunity for your own already controlled trailhead on that end of the trail. And then finally, the planned and I think it's very soon to be constructed Russell Creek Reservoir. We'll touch on that a bit in this, but because it's not currently there, we would spend a whole lot of time defining that route, but we will touch on that in a bit, or for just a bit. So now, to the plan, and I know this map is probably pretty small for y'all to go to read, but we have identified 6 trail segments, and I say segments versus sections because the way, as I understand, we're talking sections is how you build a trail, so we call them segments. The first being labeled here, number 1, is Dawson Forest. And again, these aren't really in an order of priority, but there was a little bit of thought to that on how achievable and the return on investment we thought you might get out of them, so that's kind of a little bit to the order of them. But one being, so that would connect 400 to Dawson Forest. And I'm not saying that's one phase. That trail segment might take 5 phases to get it constructed, because it will not be a quick, immediate piece, just because there's built-in challenges to it. But that is a critical connection from the point A to point B there. You saw that was kind of our top 2 points of interest that we were trying to connect. The second would be what we call the Etowah River Trail. That's just because portions of the first phase, or first segment, are along the river, but this second phase would be it would be going northeast, hopefully following the route of some future water and sewer improvements, and the right-of-way and acquisition they're making there. And I'll dig into these here a bit more breeze to these. Georgia 400, obviously you know Georgia 400. That'll be not directly adjacent to the roadway. We know nobody's really going to bike that, but somewhere along that to truly, that's one that can truly be multimodal. Like there's a definite opportunity to get people to bike from their place of work to go get lunch or whatever the case may be. And then last is the Highway 53 corridor, which is one of the probably most challenging to long-term implement, and I'll get into those a bit. A lot of that's just to do with driveways and safety concerns and stuff of that nature. And then I skipped over to also the Thompson Creek Trail. That one will be pretty simple when we go through that. So basically there's 5 major trail segments we've identified. And as you can see, I mean, this is the southeast, the southwest corner of the county, kind of connecting those key points of interest that we've identified. Before I dig into the other segments, and just because I'll talk about these a little bit, just so you know what I'm saying, and some of you may know trails well enough, but this is what's called a side path. Think of it as a big, wide sidewalk that's adjacent to the roadway, right? So that it's wide enough for it to be bikeable. So if you're over 8 feet, you legally can call it a multi-purpose path or multi-purpose trail. 8 feet's a little narrow to really be comfortable as a pedestrian or bicyclist on it, because it's not this, you feel a little like the bicyclist might could get. So all of our numbers are based off of the 12th section. That's like the engineering kind of ideal standard for a two-way trail section. Boardwalk sections, y'all know what a boardwalk is, but those will be critical where you got a stream crossing or down the floodplains of the river. We will have some boardwalk sections. Off-road and river trail, they're basically the same thing, just the river brings in a few other elements. Off-road greenway is what you think of when you think of a trail, right? That you really want to go explore. You're in the middle of the woods, you're off the adjacent roadway. You're going to have to cross some road crossings, but that's, when people put trail in their mind, that's, from a multi-purpose trail, let's put it that way. Like I said, all of these, there's no mountain bike trails, we're not getting into that level. These are all looking at trying to be accessible trails that can be both pedestrian and bikeable trail system. So I'm going to spend the rest of the time, and then I know we'll have plenty of time for questions, kind of digging in a little bit deeper into each of those 5 trail segments. This is that first that I was talking about, which we call the Dawson Forest, again, connecting from 400 over to Dawson Forest. There's actually, I'll call them 3 different kind of sections of those sections we just talked about. The first being from 400 to just about a half a mile down Dawson Forest Road. We see that as probably being an own road section or adjacent to the roadway section. There will be the need for improved drainage and probably maybe potentially curbing that in order to get that trail section constructed. But as soon as we can get off of that and try to get in the upland, kind of going through the off-road section, we try to. This route follows an existing sewer route. That's not to say that right now the county or anybody has rights to use those easements as a trail, but it's at least an identified quasi-public use that's already going through that area. So it's identifying a somewhat feasible route to be able to be utilized. Then the next section would be all along the Etowah, basically from there to Highway 9. You've got your existing river access there that is conserved as a trailhead there. And then obviously from that point, a connection up to Rock Creek Park and out to Dawson Forest. So what I was saying about that segment is not one phase. I think you can see from this that there are going to be pieces that you as a community can kind of bite off at a time to take a bite out of that apple to try to get the overall plan built. The thing to look for at that is, okay, what are our logical termini that we can create trailheads for people to be able to use without just stopping and terminating the trail in the middle of the woods or middle of the spot that's not usable. The second segment kind of picks up from where we connected with the last segment and runs northeast. This is what again we call Etowah River. It literally follows the river as much as possible. You've got some actually public-owned properties that are adjacent. That's the Forestry Commission's property there on. This will be where the continuation will go on down Etowah and connect out to the future Russell Creek Reservoir. And then this piece here, you'll notice here's my some civil engineers on in the future when we got to figure out how to make that part work. So this is where I was talking about as lowlanders. So that is going to be, and that's kind of in this section here, right? You got a major bluff that's on that southeast side of the river. We will have to figure out how to achieve that. That portion is also through an area that we know is primed and planned for growth, right? So there may be some elements of that trail section that can be incorporated into those development plans, or at least accommodated with their new roads that they build that can, achieve some of those challenges through that process. Again, it's majority off the street. There's very, very little adjacent to the street, the roadways on this section. Segment 3 is Georgia 400. This is one of the reasons I said priority-wise, don't really think that the first one was the highest priority or the most achievable. I think this one, from a standpoint of you be able to leverage your local dollars with some sort of a federal or state grant, to me seems the most viable because it's truly multimodal. If you can figure out how to achieve this, you're reducing the amount of vehicle trips per day on 400. It would be adjacent, again, following that same route, but not directly adjacent, like fairly removed where it's like benched in into the side slopes of Georgia 400, potentially even up and having to acquire easements or right-of-way outside the right-of-way every so often. Major challenge with this one will be one, you see the red circles, I had to really point those out in the first two because there wasn't a lot of that happening. Those are, on this instance, because there would have been so many if we showed every driveway conflict, those are major road conflicts, right? It's everywhere you cross a drive, that's a potential point for conflict and a challenge that you got to address through some sort of design solution. So that'll be a challenge to address, but the good news is the corridor is already there. You know, you've got great examples of this type of trail having been built all over the country. So it's not, you know, it's not far-fetched. You don't have to go acquire a bunch of right-of-way and an ability to be able to do this. Long term, you also need to think about how are you going to cross 400 safely. That we don't even really get into. That'll be a project in itself. I mean, I think if you get the trail system really working and working well, that crossing across 400 to make it truly usable is beyond just a grade crossing. Or you're either going above or below grade to do that crossing. The last piece is a fairly simple and short piece, but a pretty important one, is to connect from Thompson Creek Park just over to 400. The little section there from 53 to the park itself is kind of a small right-of-way, very small rural road. That might be an opportunity to really not do much of an improvement other than some safety signage and striping, maybe build a section off to one side. And similarly, you've got right-of-way. You've already started to develop some sidewalks. I know some of these properties are developing on the other piece, heading toward the west, toward 400. And then I know this aerial doesn't show the planned roundabout. That'll actually help a bit from a standpoint of even bicyclist and pedestrian flow, just from the control that gives to the intersection. So again, with this was implemented and the Dawson Forest Trail section implemented, it would be bikeable from the lake to the wildlife management area and back into the river. Final piece.
Okay.
Okay. Only an hour and a half. There's only 45 more slides. No, that's getting close. So this is the Highway 53, and I think I mentioned earlier, this is going to be a challenge, but we do think it's not something to just say we can't achieve because, again, of the points it's connecting, and it's just another kind of loop if you're trying to create that bigger loop system. But similar to what I showed on, or what we showed on the 400, it's even more so on this because it's not controlled access. On 53, it's the amount of driveways, the potential conflicts you'll have there is definitely going to be a challenge. We're showing two different plans. And again, the more detailed study actually takes each of these and those slightly different colored areas and gets a specific kind of breakdown on what that is, what we think that trail section will be, and projects an associated idea of a cost, very high level. But this one is one that is going to take further study. I actually think there's portions of it, or maybe all of this section. I know it can take some convincing the people to think a road that's that busy could get a road diet, but it's pretty well proven that 4 lanes without a dedicated turn lane versus 2 lanes with a dedicated turn lane and 2 bike lanes on both sides can handle the same amount of traffic, if not better. So what I'm saying with that, you're going to be constricted with some right-of-way issues in that area. So just when time comes and DOT is looking to repave or do some improvements there, start working and thinking about have a plan together to work with them to see is there a better option for what we're doing there. You may have to do nothing but restripe that roadway section in a different way and not really change the width between curb lines to be able to accommodate something in that area. And the final leg, kind of from Luncheon Campground out to the Etowah, and I know that would be one that you'd have to be in that top percentile right now to want to bike that. I think it's a very beautiful, but dicey. Yeah, dicey is a good term. But with all this implemented, hopefully at some point you could get to where you could achieve that adjacent to the roadway trail solution. But even if you can't, work with DOT to identify it as a bikeable route that just gets people, motorists, like more cautious about like what they're doing in that area. Again, that is going to be a long-term, very challenging one to address. But because of the fact that it would connect up to a very obvious trailhead point of connection down the river and connecting back over to all this growth, again, thinking back to our objectives of connecting the natural resources to the areas of current growth, we didn't want to just ignore it and say that's too hard of a solution to solve. We know at some point in the future, with enough time and money and brain power, you can kind of solve anything, right? So we wanted to get that on paper to just have you all hopefully working, or have us and all of us hopefully working together in the future to address that. So from those 5, there's the 6th piece I told you we didn't really study a whole lot in detail, but that 6th segment would go from the river and kind of up through the reservoir area and then somehow connecting over to where we are right now, right? That route, exactly what that would be and look like is a project to itself, right? Because that's a pretty long route to connect up and make that connection. But we do be thinking about that long term once you get something successful going, to be starting to think about the next phases. I think I mentioned it earlier, but any master plan is just a point in time snapshot of the best approach that you have. So be flexible. There's already been ideas that Betsy brought forward from, is there opportunities for developments coming through that we can even preclude that first little bit of on Dawson Forest Road, on road? Can we figure out a better solution for that? By all means, if there's a better solution, abandon that portion of the master plan and move forward. But the big idea being, make sure you're connecting those dots and make sure you're pushing forward. I'll touch just real briefly on this implementation portion. First, obviously, funding. We see on the next slide, there's a little bit on our cost estimating, but I purposely avoided that discussion here today for the most part. They aren't cheap. There's no doubt about it. The trail that built right, built successfully is going to be an investment. The county has got to get behind, find partners to do that. But tie it all back to the fact that it started from an economic development study. It's also, don't think of it as just recreation, right? It's boosting spending in your local businesses looking to relocate. We do a lot with public sector work, but we also do a lot with large master plan communities, starting from the ground up. And where, in the late 90s, early 2000s, your open space and your plan to sell your lots and sell your community was a golf course, right? And that was, if you checked off the checklist of what home buyers wanted, and most people in the country wanted a golf course. Well, that's not true anymore, right? I think we can all agree that golf course, that's a challenging thing to do. But now that same study and that same result is people are looking for a new home. What is the main amenity they're looking for? And it is a strong open space and most desirable interconnected trail system. So the majority of the master plan, larger communities we're doing, we're trying to plan that system internally, right? But if you as a community can plan it as community-wide, it'll just make that much more desirable from the standpoint of people coming in and investing in the community. Only other thing I'll say on this page is that we purposely did this and started with local first. And you'll notice your list is as long as any of the others for possible funding opportunities, is that it's going to start with the local community. Either that being matching funds and developing those matching funds that you can then turn into a larger fund from the state or the federal government. Just if nothing else, pushing to not let this become a static study that we never implement. It was just something that some guy from Savannah came and talked to us for a couple of minutes one day. So that I just wanted to say is really critical. because just having it there and expecting either the state or federal government to come knocking and say, hey, we'd like to fund this trail network we heard about, it's probably not going to happen, right? So just on that, make sure you adopt it for one, like implement it into local policy. Get a group of stakeholders together. That's their goal, is to make sure it doesn't get hidden on a shelf or hidden in somebody's hard drive. There's other things. Start acquiring parcels. Obviously, that's further down the road. And then there's a list here of web resources that we've included. I know some people pull out their camera and start taking pictures of the cost. It is, that's our estimate. Very, very high level. Understand there's no engineering at all that's really going into this. We've got Newport State typical project numbers. If you look at, on average, what a cost for a trail is, depending on how much, how challenging it is. I think East Coast Greenway says their trails cost about $1 million a mile to build. Some of the local metro Atlanta area communities are budgeting $2 to $3 million a mile. So that's where our numbers are about falling out. Not saying that's the end numbers. If we all see what's happening with construction materials, they can go higher, obviously. Or hopefully we can get it lower if we identify a better route. But we can't just stick our heads in the sand and think it's not going to cost anything. So it's better to get an idea together that you can start working toward and identifying those partners to get there. But again, I just bring that up that these pieces don't all have to be built at one time. This is over 19 miles worth of trails, and most communities don't have anywhere close to that miles of trails. So, if you were to achieve this, it's well worth the investment for that number of that total distance of trail area. With that, that's really the master plan. I know I kind of breezed through that pretty quick. Sometimes just sort of speak a little fast, so I'm happy to take questions and give answers to that. Yes, ma'am.
So I'm super excited about this and been kind of waiting on it for a little minute. So is it available on the website, or will it be?
I would assume it will be out further.
Yes,
Okay.
it will be.
And then also the section that you said was going to be through the woods. It looked like the material still said concrete. Is that right?
Correct.
Just not natural.
From an accessibility standpoint, natural is going to be, I don't want to stand by there anymore. Natural is going to be really hard to make accessible.
Okay.
You can technically, with some surfaces, they're accessible the day they're built, but they require a lot of maintenance in order to stay accessible.
Right. Well, the multimodal that you were talking about, people are going to want.
Well, and the majority of your dollar sources, if you're successful in getting federal money, majority of that's going to, it's just going to be an absolute requirement that you have to. There are other materials. I mean, asphalt typically is cheaper than concrete. Asphalt is one of the big cost drivers, especially that off-road section, is going to be getting construction in there to build it. So as opposed to using the material that you're going to replace in 10 or 15 years, putting something down that might cost 2 times as much now, but you don't have to get back in there very often. That's why we use that. And that is the majority of what you see from the standpoint of the trail networks. They're intentionally, I meant to bring that out earlier, they're intentionally these multi-purpose trails, not just, there definitely might be spurs off of these that would be more of a backcountry soft surface, but that is a challenge. I mean, if you're going to the aspect of just pervious and investment environment, there are pervious asphalts and pervious concretes that you could use. Again, it's a cost factor.
I was just thinking dirt. I was just thinking dirt.
Dirt, yeah.
I mean, for running and, asphalt's certainly softer than concrete from a user standpoint, user-friendly standpoint, but I understand that concrete lasts longer, especially in areas where there's potential flooding and that kind of thing. So.
And some things, some other trails that we work on from a design standpoint, these are more typically in like a loop scenario, or not just bigger overall, but pieces of it that they would go in and identify and create. Say they initially only had the funds for the 8 feet wide. They built it 8 feet wide out of concrete.
And then at a later point in time, they've come in and put another 4 feet of actual asphalt and actually with a cushion surface on top of it to make it more joggable. But that was really a very accessible, it was an existing trail around the lake that we were already, it was not a big long trail through the woods by any means. But the materials, I mean, actually that question came up, could we do it, just out of granite and pines and stuff? Again, there are ways to stabilize it a bit and get it quote unquote accessible. It's just the long-term maintenance aspect of it. I think you end up seeing a lot of challenges with that in order to keep it.
I mean, it looks great. I think it's fantastic, but like you said, it's going to take a while.
Definitely is. I mean,
Sure.
Betsy reached out to me pretty quickly, and she's like, that's a big number. I was like, yeah, it is a big number. We aren't contractors, we're designers, so we try to a bit overestimate, right? So you're hopefully getting a better number than that. But I'll be honest, if it takes you 20 years to implement this, then our numbers are going to be way up.
Well,
because those numbers are going to go up.
But I do think it's an investment in the community. I think the return on investment is definitely there. I mean, it's...
Yeah, and that's why I try to bring up that it's not just recreation.
Right.
It's absolutely, people hear trails, they think, they're just building another way for, I'm not involved in that. I don't bike, I don't walk. But it's, and especially a community like y'all have, where you've got a captured audience already that's so coming to one part of it. If you could figure out a way to get a few more over the winger a bit and then come back and have dinner again in that same area or somewhere else in the county, is well beyond just a recreational amenity for your citizens at that point.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right. Thank you all very much.
And we do have a copy of this trail plan. I mean, we will certainly get it out, but if you want some more details, he really did shave it down as far as a lot of the details in the different segments. So we have that at the chamber office. This isn't the last you'll see of the trail plan. We'll obviously be moving it along and asking the county to adopt it. This is something that whenever you meet any of these comprehensive plan meetings, you always hear, we want to keep the quality of life and be able to keep the natural state of our county is beautiful. So I think this is something that maybe we've been missing a little bit to really tie into the beauty of Dawson County and allow people to see some of those places that maybe they wouldn't have and keep it connected and keep everyone, hey, there's one benefit of COVID, everyone wants to get outside, right? And be part of a trail. So if you guys have any questions, we do have it at the chamber, like I said, but this won't be the last time that you'll see it in our parks. So thank y'all all so much for coming out today. It is raining, I'm sorry. We can just a little bit, but we look forward to seeing y'all. Yeah, Terry.
Quick question, is this being spearheaded by y'all or the county commissioners, or who's doing all this?
It's not by us.
No.
I mean, I like it, but no.
Not yet. No, just kidding. This is actually Betsy, along with Janet from the Georgia Rural, was able to put all this together so that we could do a study, just to see what it looked like. Betsy's been working on this for a while.
And I will say that one of the things I think that Ryan touched on that didn't necessarily get brought out here, but there is currently a lot of residential development pressure, particularly along the Dawson Forest corridor. So now's the time to at least obtain the right-of-way pieces, even if you don't, because if you're trying to buy it from everybody in this room and get them to agree on a route, it's very difficult. If you can do that while the developer still owns the whole plat, and then coordinate with whether it's Etowah, whether it's Sawnee, whether it's Georgia Power to access their right-of-ways, which you already can't build on, but you can use for recreation, then it makes sense. But if you're trying to do it, in 15 years when it's already built out, then it's very, very difficult. You can also put some of those costs back on the developers to say, okay, hey, you can count this against your green space or whatever. You can sort of, that's your carrot to say, okay, well, you can build your subdivision, but here's our requirement, because you're going to contribute to a trail. Whether your subdivision is really adjacent or part of the trail are not to make that part of their requirements and make some concessions on some other stuff. So there's carrot and stick ways to help them, to help fund it through the private sector, which is ultimately helps bring down the cost.
And developers don't make their property or subdivision more marketable to have a trail system, so that's not unheard of at all.
They're not unused to that.
You know, we've talked with Deb, I didn't really touch on it much, but like just take a little study of your existing codes or development requirements. Some things that are very well intentioned end up precluding somebody that might want to build a trail as part of theirs with the requirements of 5-foot sidewalk on both sides of the road. You're not going to get flat approved unless you got a 5-foot sidewalk on both sides of the road. That's perfectly acceptable in a residential community, but if there's a collector road they're building that's going to connect up two communities, you might be better off to have them invest in a 12-foot trail on one side of that collector road that those communities can tie into. But most places have adopted, we're going to meet the minimum standard, we're going to adopt a 5-foot wide sidewalk rule. Everywhere you go, we're going to build a 5-foot wide sidewalk. Again, it solves a pedestrian need, but it doesn't serve the bicycle portion of it at all.
To answer your question too, I mean, Betsy did a great job. She's been immersed in this well before I got here. But through the grant with obviously the Chamber Arm of Economic Development is partnered with the Development Authority. So the Development Authority is very, very involved, has been from day one from the process as well. Because we hear from developers, that's something that everyone wants. And again, if you sit in any of the comprehensive planning meetings, you know, we want to keep the quality of life, and that's what people really desire about Dawson County. So this just helps showcase a lot of that.
I think is there a plan to connect us with Forsyth's Greenway at all? Is there any
So
plan for that?
we do touch on it a bit,
Uh-huh.
very briefly,
Okay.
and just to talk about, put some links to what they're planning. Yeah, I mean, I do think there's an opportunity there. You know, taking my landscape architect hat off, and putting my desire of what I wish my chamber could become is more regional, right, and not just what's, you know, in my county. I'm sure you all have the same issues we have. We're solving the same problems in 3 different counties, and none of us are talking about it. So, just that, maybe to utilize an opportunity to, now, if you do adopt a plan, to at least reach across the county line and see what could we start planning to try to, you know, really make it a regional trail network. Because you've obviously got natural resources that any community in the country would be excited to be able to give their residents access to. So.
Any other questions? Really good questions. All right. Well, it was great to see y'all again. We hope you enjoyed the rest of your afternoon.